All right, let's get this show on the road, everybody. Thank you for coming. I am David Bloom. I'm a media consultant. I do a little work these days with a really cool company in the clean tech space, but I spent a long time writing about technology and entertainment and working for places like USC and MGM and joints like that. And this is a ridiculously distinguished panel. I will let each of them introduce themselves as we talk about Google, Facebook, and the interface with the rest of the universe in 3D and otherwise, and how their game and social and other components all interface with that and what the opportunities are. Thank you for being here. This is apparently the 3D conference. I didn't quite realize that Digital Hollywood had morphed into a new dimension, but it is apparently there. Let me begin with Mark. Tell us a little bit about this Unity thing. I heard it's a big deal somewhere.
That's a big deal somewhere. Yeah, so my name is Mark Schoenagel. I'm a technical evangelist for Unity Technologies, which is a pretty cool gig. I get to fly around the world and mostly meet with customers, go to different studios, see what they're up to, report back to R&D, do talks like this, do a lot of conventions and things. So I've been at Unity for about 2 years, and then 18 years before that, I was at a 3D animation company, or a software vendor, Softimage, until I switched over to Unity.
And they're really a big company, too. So Softimage does a lot of stuff that's used in Hollywood, right?
Yes, until, sadly, the fine folks at Autodesk decided to retire the product. So it was.
And thus you're at Unity.
And thus I'm at Unity, which is a far, far better place to be.
All right. Go ahead.
I'm Brett Durrett. I'm the CEO of IMVU. I got my start in video games, did about 20 titles, and about 15 years ago, Red Snow Crash fell in love with the idea of the metaverse and immediately went off and started founding a virtual world. And after years of experience in a virtual world, realized that it's really not about place, it's about people, and it's where things change for me about social. And so IMVU has been around for about 10 years, and we do social 3D, most engagement in this type of space. And we focus on the interaction between people in a 3D space. And so we're always looking at the social components. I don't think what else about the company that's important. Very, very focused on where VR is going, because we see VR as the next logical step for all of the 3D content that we have and the interactions between people.
My name's Matt Johnson. I'm with Bottle Rocket Apps. I run innovation and entertainment for the company. We're a Dallas-based strategy and development company that does primarily apps, mainly stuff that you've probably seen for NBC and Scripps and Starwood and Coca-Cola. We do a lot of brand native apps. I've been a big fan as well, growing up on VR and fiction centered around it, so it's cool to see it kind of come to fruition, at least to some degree. So VR being a natural extension of mobility with the displays technology and then sensors evolving. It's been an interesting couple of years as we've looked to focus on the brand side of things and how do we make that a reality for a lot of our existing customers.
Hi everyone, I'm Tom Impalamani from Virtually Live. So we're developing an immersive stadium experience for fans of sports. Sports are, as I'm sure you're well aware, some of the biggest social gatherings of people around the world watching live events at the same time. And we try to give immersive experiences to those 98% of fans around the world who can't actually go to the stadium. We're doing that by not using 360 stitched VR. We're actually doing it the other way around, from the outside in, taking data, reconstructing it, dropping fans into the stadium and allowing them to move around. Most importantly, it's about social interaction. As I was reflecting with some of the panelists here, people don't really go to a stadium for an amazing view. It's normally a lot worse than what you get at home on TV.
What was the technical term you used?
Most views are... It was a polite English...
polite English term known as...
I think it was crap.
Crap. Yeah, most views in the stadium are crap. That was... He's so
so we're trying to recreate actually the social experience of the stadium, as well as giving people an awesome opportunity to get different views than they can otherwise get. So standing on the field alongside the players whilst the game's going on, that's what we're trying to do.
All right. I'm Mike Zaida. I'm the director of the USC Game Pipe Laboratory, which I founded about 11 years ago. I also founded a computer science games program at USC and the year-long advanced games class that's joint between cinema and engineering. And before that, I was at a school in Monterey, Naval Postgraduate School. I founded the MOVES Institute, the Modeling Virtual Environments and Simulation Institute. If you went out to any AAA title game company today, you would find large numbers of the 1,500 students I've graduated over the last 11 years. Some big studios are 50% engineers from our program.
All right, great. So this is allegedly focused on Google and Facebook, but because I have you guys here and not Google and Facebook, we're going to talk about you guys. They're two of the biggest technology companies in the world. They've invested, by them, modest sums, but not modest to anybody else, in 3D technologies with Oculus and Cardboard. But just sort of big picture, what's the play here for them, and what's the opportunity for you all fitting in within the world of these giant companies? How do you guys play with them? And Mike, if you could kind of talk about the opportunities for the kids coming up. Let's start with you.
Okay, well, you know, we have a demo day and a showcase every year, and I think we're usually get the hiring people from all of the large game companies, and honestly, we haven't seen anybody come recruiting anybody for virtual reality or augmented reality yet, but we hope that will
That's
change.
next week, right?
We're going.
You got your game demos.
10th of December.
10th of December.
10th of December. Come to our showcase events. Open anyone. It's
Hire
fun.
all the graduates to be.
You can come see our students and see what they built over the last year. I think. Let me think about how. You know, we talk about Facebook. We talk about Google being into the AR and VR space. Let's start with Facebook. Facebook is primarily flat. It's 2D text. It's 2D imagery. You might load up a video. Not too many people do that. And now you're saying Facebook has gone and bought Oculus and they're going to change the world and change the way Facebook is. It's not going to be their flat 2D experience. It's not going to be those flat images. It's going to have to be something different. It's also going to not have to be virtual reality, because I think when you put a head-mounted display on and you stumble around your living room or you're out in the real world and they put a head-mounted display on, I'm also going to stumble out and trip over the curb and fall down the stairs. So I'm not sure everyone's figured out this socially. On the Google side, Google's a little bit more like a research organization that also produces neat and cool stuff. They've got some... And billions of dollars in profits, so they're not quite like a university. Exactly.
Yeah,
so Google sort of confused me in a way. They've invested hugely in Magic Leap, which is awesome. They've got their Project Tango toolkit, which for building augmented reality things, which is awesome. But they just took their entire game division, Niantic Labs, which is focusing on how do you use all that stuff, and
They had the games. They had
shoved it out the door.
Yeah, they sent it out. They kicked it out of the nest.
Yeah, what the heck?
Oh, they bought Nest and they kicked it out. But I mean, Niantic is off.
Spun off, and
They did the first really kind of cool AR game, right?
That is a mixed message.
Yeah, but they
had the Ingress game.
Right, Ingress.
They built a game called Endgame, which didn't do as well as Ingress, but it looked like they really knew what they were doing. And now, when they kick that out, it's like, what?
Right.
All right.
Go ahead, Brett.
Yeah, so I actually, when the Oculus announcement was made, when the Oculus announcement was made, I happened to be co-working at a friend's company, which is a game company. And it was pretty amazing to be in the office because you had all these people that are passionate about games that were making retching sounds because they're really unhappy with Facebook acquiring Oculus. And Oculus, they had really thought belonged to the game community, and they weren't too excited about Facebook.
It was like an indie band signing with a major label. It was kind of funny.
It really was. And so I'm sitting there borrowing a desk that day and going like, yes, because to me this was the first huge validation of that VR could be something. And more importantly, every single acquisition that Facebook has done has been social. And so my hope was that, one, they would have the money and the ability to actually do what it would take to make a real social VR experience, which was not a virtual world in my mind, but meant something much deeper. But I was also hoping it would actually change the way the other players that are going into the VR space would be thinking about it. So when you have all the other major platforms coming out with VR, they'd have to look and say, what if social wins? Mark Zuckerberg, when he announced the acquisition, talked about social. He's reinforced that when he spoke earlier this year about the future of VR. He has reinforced that it is absolutely about being social. The CEO of Oculus has also said social and avatars are going to be very critical to the success and adoption. And that's been echoed again from Samsung's head of VR, also saying that it's going to be social. If VR is going to win, it's social. And so As much as we talk about games and these other experiences, I really want to see what is it about the human connection that gets driven, that's going to be discovered about why this is such a better form of communication, why it's more amazing to talk to someone this way, why you feel that connection.
Right. So you've got all that 30 million bits and pieces of content that you're trying to throw on there that are actually tied to somebody who wants to go into a world and look good.
Right. So the thing that was exciting for us is we have, we've been around for a long time. We have over 130 million registered customers, 30 million items of content in our catalog. And if someone were to say, hey, we need a unique representation for every single person on Facebook today, we can deliver that. So that's why I was kind of in the corner of this office going like, yes. And why we focused a lot of our technology on opening up an API, actually that works with Unity now, to allow anyone to pull our avatars in and say, I want a unique image that represents me.
This begs a question, though, because Facebook's always been about real names for your accounts. Are they going to have real avatars that actually look like you? I mean, maybe a little bit less gray or platinum blonde, as I like to say.
We're distinguished up here.
We're all very distinguished here. Or extinguished in my case.
Building on that point, I think it was interesting. The tipping point for me was a couple of weeks ago here in LA at the Oculus Connect conference. I was able to see the toy box demo for the first time. I don't know if you've seen that, but it's kind of a low fidelity. I can interact with another person, use voice over IP to communicate with them. And it was a moment for me where he was asking me to do something in the environment, and I wasn't complying the way I should. And immediately across from me, his avatar, I could tell him he dropped his shoulders, like in frustration. And I got pissed at first, like, give me a break. This is all new to us. But then I realized that was the moment, right? That was when I realized that we're able to use avatars and things like that to communicate in a space that's unique and different. Now, I think the traditional Facebook won't go away. We'll always have mobility or different native formats to be able to interact in different ways. But there's a new medium about to evolve of people being able to emote together within virtual space.
So how much of a lag time, what was the lag time for that reaction? Because I'm just wondering, is it like just an avatar with a pissy attitude, or was it actually him punching a button to say slump shoulder?
No, these are actually positionally tracked hand controllers that we were both using. So the hands convey great emotion, within the body, and then that's yeah, right, yeah, and it's all tied to the shoulders as well. So you're able to kind of, I guess what they call inverse kinematics or things like that, to be able to show great emotion through these things. So it was just a subtle thing, but that moment made me realize that okay, I get kind of backing up why Facebook did this. This is. They really saw this opportunity of people are going to be able to have shared experiences together.
So it's superpowering that social sharing conversation, the texting, and everything else that they've got going. So Instagram avatars, that's going to be the next thing, I guess, or we'll see. Tom, you had something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I mean, it's... If you look at sports as one example, one of the things that we've seen when we compare what we do with Stitch 360 VR sports experiences is if you don't have that social interaction, people get pretty fed up pretty quickly. So I think the dwell time on some of the experiences is about 5 minutes. If you're filming, a 3-hour game, that's a pretty big problem. So you put a social element and you put, other fans in alongside you and you can interact with each other, and you get a much higher dwell time. At the moment, 20, 30 minutes, soon, hopefully longer as it's a more comfortable experience. Right. So in terms of, the biggest problem that VR has is convincing people to come back again and again. To do that, you have to have a social element. For us in sport particularly, you wouldn't want to necessarily go to a stadium on your own. You want to go with your friends. We're trying to do that same thing virtually.
I think you also have the problem of throwing up occasionally, but they're the big problem. I think what we're seeing, what you just mentioned, is today what we're seeing as far as social, like you'll see the components of I'm doing something with someone. So you look at the ping pong demo, and it's like it's obviously fun. You're there with someone else and doing it, and it's a level of social where we're
called Pong, okay?
It's Pong, okay. It's Pong 2.0, but the shared experience is there, and that's fun.
Yeah.
But it's not the actual social. It's not the next step beyond that, I think, is really going to be like, do you get the emotion out of it? And you were asking, does everyone have to have a real avatar? What we found is that it's not the case. That people will sometimes choose an aspirational version or a stylized. It's how you want to be seen. It's a lot like an iPhone case or something. It represents something about your personality rather than necessarily you exactly.
Not to mention the guys at SiegeCon and what they're going to look like. So anyway, his worst panel ever was at SiegeCon 2 weeks ago. That was you. Yeah. So those avatars are going to be really
Twitter lights up with SiegeCon people saying,
"Oh, death to him!" Yes. You know, it's interesting because we're talking a little bit about, Facebook and Google have both invested massively in video as a whole. I mean, YouTube is the second largest search engine. 400 hours a minute are uploaded on that site. At least that's what it was in July. I'm sure it's more than that now. Facebook's gotten in the game in a very big way. But what's the future for that kind of video creation on YouTube and all that? Are these tools yet ready for? It's not prime time. Are they ready for YouTube time? I don't even know what it is because it's this different world of stuff.
I think the biggest issue is the network into your home
right
there that will support it? Because when
what do you need?
What do you need? Well, you need a lot. I mean, if you had a very simple AT&T 6 megabits per second, and you went over, today, and so I'm just going to run a 1080p video from Netflix, and then your daughter in the other room starts running a Netflix, and what happens? Hang up, pauses, slowdowns. Great majority of Americans have very poor networking speed to their homes.
Right.
Some of these big cities, San Francisco, Los Angeles,
Provo, Kansas City.
Exactly. Some of those ones that Google has put in some networking, they can do this. But when you start saying, I'm going to put 360-degree, VR video into your home over this network so that you can put on a head-mounted display, we're not there yet.
Well, it's worse than that because your consumption's coming from mobile now.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. It's like forget into the home.
Yeah, so
into the phone.
I mean,
right?
that's where you're watching your video these days. So.
All right. Well, last night I watched the news. There was a Star Wars, not the Star Wars trailer that came out, but
I heard that did okay. The trailer.
I heard it
there was
once or twice.
Some passing interest in that.
Something on something. But there's a VR experience now on Samsung Gear VR that I also checked out last night.
For Star Wars.
For Star Wars.
Oh, that's.
But it's VR.
We should all go.
So it's a
right?
VR video. It's one of the nicer ones I've seen yet. But that's streamed over 4G. So I'm not sure. I don't think the delivery bandwidth is such a big deal. I think it's way more on the capturing side of thing. I mean,
but that would have been totally optimized by Samsung, a relatively large and successful electronics company, to work over its own phones and its networks of its partners.
No, I don't know. I'm on a 4G connection on AT&T. Samsung has no control over that.
Was that downloaded and played back or streamed?
Streamed. Yeah, fire up Gear VR. As soon as you pop it up, it immediately starts. And it was grainy and crappy at first. I was like, oh, this sucks. And then, bam, it popped on nice and solid. And I was able to look around. And you're on the desert with the big crashed, where that cool triangle-shaped ship is. And you're able to look around. And it's neat. I kind of wondered to myself why they didn't just choose to build that in 3D. But that's beside the point. But I think more on the challenging isn't distribution. It's acquiring that. I mean, look outside to the left. There's that headgear thing with all the GoPros on it.
Right.
Like walking around that, I see is far more constrictive, which is an awesome tool, but I can't see all of us here going around with big 360.
Just wait. Just wait,
right? I mean,
it's going to be all the rage.
Statement of 2017.
No, we're gonna look like the Google cars driving around autonomously, right? I mean, I find that far more constricting than any type of delivery method or what. I mean, so what? I just have to download it if I want it in full quality. Like that's. To me, I find that far more of a video.
Yeah, but the thing with the Star Wars thing, it turns out that it's not a documentary. It's not quite real. So, like that big triangular ship doesn't actually exist.
Yeah.
So you could probably optimize that. I mean, Mike, you could.
Well, that's why I wondered why they didn't. Since that's an entire effect shot, why not just build that whole thing in 3D and then make that a 3D model, where then you get a lot more fidelity. You can actually stuff,
and you can optimize it for.
You can be interactive with it as opposed to the video where you're just kind of along for the ride.
They just took a clip out and.
Yeah,
Lucas.
It was very, very cool. I mean, wickedly cool. I did it, a few times. You're just kind of on a ride going through. But, actually, we can just get back to the first point for just a second. I find VR far more isolating than I find it social at the moment. Like, there is a whole process you have to go through. Like, when I'm at home, I get my little simulator seat. I got to strap myself in. I got to make sure the experience is running right. I got to put the headset on. I got to wipe it down. I got to put my earphones on. Got to turn the rumble seat on. I mean, you have to do all these things to kind of get ready. Whereas when you go to Facebook, you just go and you scroll through all your things.
Like.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a challenge to find a social. There is a lot of social stuff you can do in VR, but there's also a lot of awesome stuff that you do isolated, where you're in a room, you can't see your friends, you can't see anything. You don't invite your friends over to play VR. and then have them sit and watch you play Space Simulator for a while.
Right.
They sit and watch and laugh their asses off at you.
Yeah, pretty much.
At Oculus Connect, I was playing goalie, and I'm sitting there going like this. And I'm wondering what people are thinking I'm doing.
I saw you.
Like,
And
it was hilarious. It was great.
But you do that normally, right?
I
mean,
do.
you sort of.
And I saw that video on Facebook.
It's
dang it.
It's trending on Twitter too. Tom, yours is an intensely social component. I mean, that's a part of what you do, and Brett will get to you too. But what do you think about that? I mean, 3D in the social space because of the stuff you got to get into to be able to do it. What do you think about that opportunity? I mean, how does that work?
So
how many folks are getting in a room and watching a game together in 3D?
So at the moment, so we focus on small groups of people. Generally, you don't want to be in a stadium full of 60,000 people who can prod you during the game and talk to you. That's not going to be a massively compelling experience.
That's called Twitch, isn't it?
That's called pretty much. But it's really sort of close groups of friends within the stadium environment with kind of layered sound and audio.
Yeah, see, that sounds cool.
That
sounds
works.
cool. If I could call all my college football buddies up and say, hey, my team is playing.
Yeah.
Let's all watch it together.
And you
that sounds like
and
fun.
you can watch it from different perspectives. So you
Yeah.
can actually say, "Hey, did you see this?" And and actually one of the I guess the downsides of sporting VR is if you're standing on a field or you're looking in the wrong place, you can miss stuff. So if you're in a social environment, you can kind of feed back
I've
to
always
each
had
other.
this amazing dream of when we're able to capture a sporting event, but not using cameras, but using 3D digitizing cameras. So think of Google Tango, but capturing a sporting event at crazy high resolution where then you can be anywhere you want. And that's going to happen.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of time.
It's a lot of computing that you're putting on the field there, and there's a lot of power that has to be there, and a lot of heat dissipation has to go.
But this is years away. But that's the holy grail.
So that's what we're doing it the kind of hacked way, which is taking three-dimensional stereoscopically captured data and re-rendering it.
Nice.
Which is kind of the hack to the full volumetric capture, which would require hundreds of cameras around the stadium and probably so much light that you'd fry the players
well, like I
while
said,
they're playing.
It's years from now.
So that's a few
years
years
from now.
off. But in terms of you can create an experience that essentially mimics that. And as long as what we find is as long as you embed actual footage alongside it so that it feels real, then you can kind of transport people there.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong. I don't think that VR isn't social. It can be social, but it can also be very isolating.
So,
Yeah.
Brett, talk about this a little bit.
I think this could be one of the challenges, though, because in all of these examples where you can say we can present a great experience,
Yeah.
the burden of me actually experiencing that right now really is we're not talking about mobile VR.
Yeah.
That's gonna the batteries on my phone is gonna be dead in 3 minutes, and I'm gonna be on a train with getting robbed while I'm wearing a blindfold, basically.
Excellent.
So these are like I'm at home, I'm sitting down in my chair, I'm putting a scuba mask on. This is a very dedicated, focused time, and it's not something that I casually do, which is, I think for social to really take off, for it to grow, it has to be it's part of every part. And this is where I think AR has a much bigger opportunity, because AR can be with you and integrated into your real life, whereas VR is that isolating. I'm blindfolded in public.
You're stepping out into another world. Now, Matt, you create a lot of stuff for a lot of companies, and I'm sort of curious about these days. Is there preference more for an AR kind of experience or more VR? I mean, what are you seeing across
absolutely.
all these?
So, I mean, we kind of feel like the opportunity right now, as we believe the consumer market's going to be relatively slow to adopt because of just either price point or, like you said, you got to be tethered to something. It's a pretty expensive PC. There's still no official hardware out there yet, so there's that. But from a standpoint of looking for what we call blue ocean is in this, there's lots of great companies out there that are going to be creating entertainment content and gaming. I think the enterprise is really where a unique opportunity is for us, and the idea
is that like training videos.
Yeah,
and things like that,
training
or
is
what
a part of that, but the idea that I heard you mention the U.S. Army type stuff. I mean, simulators for airlines, they're the ones that have had the dollars to be able to invest in this technology for years.
Medical.
We're about to democratize that, right? These companies are going to spend millions and millions in procuring this
and the military, obviously, at ITC, another USC institute has been working on these immersive spaces for 15 years.
Yeah, it's the Institute for Creative
down
Technology.
the street here, actually.
And I think it's going to be really interesting, though, because I think social will come. I think there's a social component to that. When you talk about back to the the hands demo and stuff, immediately I saw for several of our customers, that deal in high-tech manufacturing, very complex products and sales cycles. The ability to now bring people into a room, explode things, take things apart, teach and learn. I mean, a lot of the HoloLens type stuff that they've shown is kind of along that path. So I think AR and VR will both have a space in that. So that's really where we're kind of driving our clients to right now.
Yeah, I think it's important. Michael, you wanted to talk about, or Mark, you wanted to talk a little bit about HoloLens and Valve. Can you just speak a little bit about them?
Sure. Yeah, so HoloLens, I don't know if you all know about HoloLens. It's Microsoft's foray into AR. I've had actually an opportunity to wear one, use one for a couple days. Unity is actually, we're like the sole 3D engine, preferred engine, whatever, for HoloLens. So that's fantastic. But HoloLens is, right now they're prototypes, so they're a little heavy. They get a little warm. That's why they're not out yet. But generally, you put it on, and you have a clear visor that lets you see the room with your own eyes. Other AR, like through cardboard, uses the camera to then digitize the room, and then you're seeing a camera representation. So it's not quite the same, but with HoloLens, it truly is a 3D environment. It scans the room. It builds wireframes out of this table. Like I can click a button in Unity, and this table becomes, it's the Matrix. Like every object becomes a 3D object, and I can bounce objects off of other real-world objects. Stuff can fly behind this and come back around. It's very, very cool. It's very different, but I just heard from them, and this is public, I guess, now, that for the next 2 years it's going to be for commercial only.
Well, now it's public.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Do we have any journalists in the room?
You can write that.
Report on this?
I'll put that up on Facebook. How do I spell your name?
They finally announced launched a price.
Put it on an Apple site.
But you got to put a headset on. No. So HoloLens is very, very different. It's mind-blowingly awesome. I haven't seen Magic Leap, but apparently it's similar, only using a little bit different technology, where they're shooting lasers in your eyes, which
nothing can go wrong.
Nothing can go wrong there.
Nothing could go wrong.
And then HTC, when Facebook
bought the FAA, right?
when Facebook bought Oculus, yes, there was the collective groan that went out, and I think that pissed one person off in particular, which was Gabe Gabe Newell, the CEO of Valve, because they had done a lot of work with Oculus, and suddenly that work was out the window. So they decided to make their competing products. So the HTC, well, they've signed up with HTC to actually manufacture it, and they say they're going to beat Oculus to the market by this Christmas. So we'll see if that actually happens.
They've got their whole Steam engine.
They got a Steam engine. They got the platform.
Yeah. So they got a way to deliver it at a very high quality to an audience. It's hardcore that would adopt it. It's all the guys that.
And it's
Mike knows, right?
It's
basically
a little different on the experience side, because like with an Oculus, even with the shipping Oculus, you're going to be confined to an IR camera that shoots and captures where the headset is in that space. So as soon as you leave the field of view of that camera, your head tracking goes all over the place, or your positional tracking. Whereas the Valve system has two lasers that sit in the corner of your room, little small boxes that shoot little lasers out, which you don't see, but your headset sees them, so it's full world positioning. Like I built a demo for a manufacturing company the other day where I put myself on a dolly that a mechanic would be on, and I slid under a fire truck. So I'm laying on my floor, and I'm underneath the fire truck, and then I could get out of it, and I could walk all around the room and stick my head in the thing, because it's full room. Wherever you go, it goes. Yeah. But to do that, I am literally moving from my house in Redondo and moving to Oregon, because I don't have the space in Redondo to afford a whole dedicated room, just have VR that doesn't have a bunch of chairs and obstacles in it that I'm going to trip and fall on.
Yeah,
so,
this is the biggest social issue that we have. By the way, I love the HTC Vive demos. They're wonderful. It is when I saw this at GDC earlier in the year, I thought I should quit my job and go work for these guys, because this is so awesome.
Yeah.
Everything I've seen from Oculus has been horrible. In comparison.
I don't want to say
you much prefer the stuff you're seeing on the Valve platform.
Oh, absolutely. They know what they're doing, but they have, again, some of the issues, which is, the laser tracker has problems with reflections. So if you have any glass or mirrors or shiny objects in the space,
feng shui is really important.
Special room.
You have to have
a special room.
Well, again, we get down to how much am I willing to go through to? I mean, the value of the experience has to be so much better to do any of these things.
Yeah.
Or your own holodeck, right?
Right.
You gotta have your own holodeck.
And so the other thing is, we're talking about availability, is the stuff just doesn't exist, and it doesn't exist even when it does come out. It's not really at a consumer level. So Oculus is, what, $1,500 with hardware and, I mean, for the PC that you need to run it.
Man, the PC is crazy.
I have no idea where you find a PC that costs that much, but theoretically there's one that you can spend that much on with the...
What would the specs be, just to give people an idea?
I don't even know. I mean...
Is it like a Mac Pro?
Oh my gosh, that's entry level.
Yeah.
You can't run project cars. If I don't have 2 Titan cards running an SLI, I cannot get 75 frames a second, even at mediocre settings.
These are not consumer machines. So the Gartner hype cycle is still saying, we're 5 years away from the peak of consumer for VR.
Well, this is one of the reasons why I think Valve's actually probably pretty well positioned, because who is Valve sending stuff to? It's guys willing to spend a crap ton of money on lots of games that are already in 3D space. They don't throw up when they go into a 3D space. They shoot things.
And very expensive graphics cards.
And they're upgrading those graphics cards every
hungry.
6 months. They're spending a few thousand on their rigs over time. I mean...
that seems like we're getting to it gets us to a part of the market, and an obvious part of the market, the gamers, because they're willing to spend the money.
Yeah, it's a spear point.
But when we're saying it's social, when we want to get consumer, when we want to reach everyone, it really does have to be like, what is something that is non-intrusive in my life that gives me additional value from using it, that's also at a price point where I'll buy. And people will say, "Oh, well, Google Cardboard," and it's like, not. I mean, it's neat. It's like, the first time you've looked at ViewMaster or anything, it's like, but it's not the solution. I'm still not going to be out in public and say, "Oh, I want to do something social. Hold on."
I saw you on your airplane yesterday with the Gear VR strapped to your face.
Yeah. And someone had written on my forehead when I took it off.
Yes.
I was like, what is this?
That was me. That was me.
I think that's the TV show. America's funniest VR videos.
Which is why it just keeps coming back to AR. Like, if you can imagine something that's not as creepy as Google Glass, that people are not put off by it so much.
Well, that's a low bar.
But you can pull it in. You can imagine that there is no overhead to being social with it or to adding something to your environment. That's why I think it has such an advantage. The killer app for that, when I think about it, is actually like something like this is LinkedIn. Because there's nothing. I mean, I would love to be able to walk through a conference and have information saying this is blah blah blah.
This is like the Terminator though doing his target acquisition.
Right, exactly.
So you're walking through there, you're going CEO, this is going boom, and you just figure out who they're already connected with, and he's like, oh, so how's your kids? What's the deal with so and so? We used to work together. I mean, that's creepy. Okay, that's actually beating the bar.
Yeah, you could get that from the government, right?
It's creepy, but it would be incredibly convenient when you hit conferences and it's like, where did I know you? Yeah, I met you a year and a half ago for 15 minutes. What was the conversation?
So it's like hyper CRM is what you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine that being like a great app. I don't know if I would call that social.
You wouldn't need to have business cards. You just kind of blink at each other and boom, exchange your data.
Yeah, it might be like enterprise level stalking versus social, but it would fit.
I'm feeling really comfortable right now.
I'm seeing some really good logos here. Enterprise level stalking. Yeah. And my favorite, never barf.
Never barf. So, Matt, what are you seeing in terms of the AR space? I mean, are there things out there that actually reach out to the things that you guys have done, or things that maybe some of your competitors have done that you like, that are in the AR space that are kind of interesting and kind of in now?
Yeah, the only real foray that we've had into it in the labs has been in the Google Glass space. Obviously, we all know where that ended up, and it was more of an experiment on some use cases that we thought were interesting, aligned with our client, the Food Network. So you can imagine some ability to, while you're cooking, get data to supplement
add
that
now
experience.
This much or saute these
exactly.
things.
Just environments where you want to be able to
ingredients.
use your hands. They're getting dirty, but you don't want to pick up your phone or touch things, right? So it's about looking at what the use case is for us on there. In terms of we're obviously interested in HoloLens and where that's going in the enterprise, but we have much more focus on VR than AR right now. I think AR's a little bit longer timeline.
So B2B, VR, big budgets that will pay for all your investment.
Sure.
Okay, you're off of that, yeah.
One of the things I think is really important is, we've seen we saw the failure of the Microsoft's Kinect system. And Kinect came out, everyone was very excited about it. And it came out, and it was out for about 24 months, and people played those 5 games that they came with the Kinect. And after 24 months, you couldn't get a student to enroll in the class that told you how to build Kinect games. And I'm a little worried about everybody who's saying our VR system, our AR system is going to be out by Christmas 2015, or heck, even 2016, comes out too early without tracking, or the tracking's not very good. we could be this industry could be stillborn, right, if it comes out too quickly.
So what? I'm interested. The rest of you guys, what are the odds of that happening? Say it comes out by this time next year, just ahead of holiday 2016, in a serious way, maybe with a couple of apps, something that's kind of compelling. Each of you go through and give me your chances, your odds of this sort of falling on its face.
Well, I think mobile experience can be done now. Which is no wires. You put your phone in it, away you go. That's good. But the better, you can do 50,000 triangles in that 3D image. When I start to see people saying, well, the Oculus, I can do 2 million triangles, but I got this big cable out the back and the hand controllers.
You look like H.R. Geiger's latest creation.
Yeah, there's got to be a second person who's making sure I didn't pull the computer off the desk and onto the floor and turn it into pieces. So I think we are a ways away.
I'm obviously a solid believer in the market.
Yeah.
But
virtually you're a solid.
So I think there are a number of we're all in. It's going to be huge. So I genuinely believe that it's as much about two things. One, we've touched on before. The hardware friction at the moment is a real pain. Like even for companies like us demoing, any company going to shows like this, you have to carry a £15 computer. You have to spend 10 minutes configuring it. That's at some point you're going to have to reset it. All of these are teething problems for a new market, for new technology. Is that going to lead to mass adoption immediately globally? No, there are limitations, but you can give people good experiences through mobile currently, and those frictions will hopefully improve. The second thing is content. So users, you wouldn't buy a console with no games. You can't at the moment. The bank of content for VR is limited because there's only so many companies doing it, and it's still pretty primitive. I think with the investment that people are now putting into the market, it is going to be content driven. But everyone is still looking for those killer apps. I think sport is one of those. There are others, but as long as those experiences are high quality, then that will drive usage. Do we believe it's going to take off? Yeah, I think there's too much innovation going into the market to not create compelling experiences.
Hey, Matt, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. It will take off. I think you got to set your bar of success, a little more granular than just everyone's going to adopt this immediately. And actually, a successful initiative that we had earlier this year is we created a Jim Beam experience in VR. It's live in about 30 markets right now.
The idea of virtual bourbon.
Yeah.
Virtual bourbon doesn't.
So at first,
the feeling sick is okay.
When I brought this to Oculus at first, they were kind of like, "Oh, terrible idea." And I said, "Well, we're doing it anyway," so we embraced it. But it's live in about 30 markets now. But it's interesting because their measure of success was we want to be innovative, we want to get to market first, and we have a use to say we need to educate our customers on a very complex distilling process and unique distilling process that we have to educate them. So they're hand delivering this to the bars. They're setting them up with a story. This is part of that story, and then
they've already got the delivery network because they're already going there and
that's
giving
exactly
away.
Right. So the infrastructure is already around it. So distribution's not really the problem there. And then it's this was really cool. They go and socialize and talk about it. You should go check this out at the bar next week. And this is that consumer's first real interaction with VR. So this brand brought that to them.
And they're a little drunk, so they think it's really great.
And then they get a shot at when they're done with the experience, and all's good in the world.
It's a total win.
That's right.
What do you think, Brett?
So I was reading an explanation of why this wave of virtual reality is actually going to succeed this time. And it was talking about really the price of the components has come down so it's accessible to people. And it's gone from sort of just enterprise uses to us actually having a better understanding of how we could apply this to consumers. And that quote was from a 1993 book by Tom Hayward, Adventures in Virtual Reality. But the full paragraph actually was.
And if we had AR, we'd have a link to that book because it's on Google Books.
I'd be reading it right now.
There was a few paragraphs that you could really cut and paste as to like why VR is going to be successful. So I think there's a huge opportunity.
What year was that? 94?
93. 93. Tom Hayward was the author. So I think that was wave 2. So
here, let's do it old school.
Yeah. So
old school on your phone.
I think VR could be huge, but I don't think it's a given. And I still can come back to like the as we look after the games and some of these experiences, they're novel, they're fun. You can definitely hit a certain market with it. But for it to be something that really is successful, I really do, and since this panel is about social, you have to have, like, what is the Facebook equivalent experience where, like, I want to connect with people doing this, and that I don't think anyone has the answer for yet. I have personal beliefs about what's going to be the ingredients to do that.
Has Zuckerberg talked about this in any useful way?
So,
I'm sort of curious.
So they've been very clear about social. The CEO of Oculus has actually talked about the importance of avatars in a social experience. But a lot of the examples that Facebook has used has been like, we go to a sporting event together and stuff like that, and we can do things together.
So Tom's use case is one that they're talking about.
You know,
Tom's calling Zuckerberg now, right?
Yeah, the courtside seats at the basketball game is like the quote that comes out all the time. Yeah. That you're sharing that with someone, but they haven't really talked about that. Like, not is it how do I check my feed from virtual reality, but like what is the equivalent of me like messaging or posting on someone, but like the VR experience of that. And so that, I think, you know, when that problem is solved, and it's a really, really hard problem, to me that's where it can be, you know, massive consumer and VR succeeds. But until then, I think you end up with a niche or something that's, you know, I won't say a fad, but like it's appealing to a certain level of an audience, but not everyone. Just the you know, until you can basically say it's part of my everyday life, I use this to connect with people, it just won't be broad-scale consumer.
Well, now, Mark, I know Unity's rather invested in the 3D space, the VR space, un poquito, as they say. But what's the timing that makes it most likely for serious success? What are you guys sort of anticipating as you look down the road here?
What we anticipate may be different than my personal views, but I'll just try to give you a bit of both. First, when I put on my first set of 3D glasses for 3D television, I watched my first 5 minutes of a movie, said this sucks, and that was the last time I used my 3D television.
Yeah, 3D I think is a very interesting,
that was
concerning model for this.
Yes, everyone seems to want to equate the two, and they are so different. The first time I put a real VR headset on, my first one was 20 years ago, a virtual I/O one, but the first time I put on a DK1 and then a DK2, I was like, wow, this has potential, and I've put that thing on almost every day since. So there's a huge difference between those two, which wasn't at all the question, but just want to get that out there that they are very, very different, and one was a fad that shouldn't have never happened. But anyway, on the VR side, I think when all this stuff finally comes out here at the end of the year, beginning of next year, the stuff that's going to be very successful, in my opinion, are the simulators. And that maybe because I'm a fan, but I find like racing simulators, I'm a big Formula One fan. I've actually welded this whole contraption in my house so I can sit in the thing, do VR, and play F1, and it's the greatest thing ever. Then after a couple beers, I switched to NASCAR, but that's a whole other story. So that's simulators.
What's the beer? Is it Pabst? Is it Coors? I'm just sort of curious what the beer is.
You hit it with the first one, my friend.
Man, yeah. I know the NASCAR audience here, I can tell you.
Well, you got PBR, you can spill it, not all of it pops out there. Right. You know, it's in a can, you usually
it doesn't do any damage, there's nothing in it.
You're always spilling beer in VR. VR is very easy to knock some. Anyway, so I think simulators, Star Wars is coming out. When there's the first Star Wars simulator, it's going to go ape crap. Go invest
Given what Battlefront's doing, that may do okay.
There's a game called Elite Dangerous. You're in space. I feel like I'm in space. I'm looking around. I'm in space. I've built my throttle controls to mimic what are in the game, and it feels perfect. So there are definitely some games right now that will hold your attention for hours and hours and hours, even with the crappy quality that the DK2 is. I do think that I do agree that the Oculus stuff right now has been eclipsed by the Valve stuff, but a lot of the Oculus experiences we're gauging is on DK2, which is not very, it's like 10, or it's a 1080p panel, so Valve is much higher resolution. The shipping Oculus is going to be a much higher resolution, so, you know, they should be close to being on par, with the exception of walking around a room. As we get forward, say going forward a year, when hopefully NVIDIA, maybe ATI, if they can ever make a good graphics card, they got to make cards that don't, like, I can't invest $900 cards to run a VR experience well. That's just crazy, but that's what it is right now to run some of these games at the right frame rate. You have to hit 90 frames a second at a very high resolution panel, 2560 by whatever, multiply by 2 because you have 2 cameras rendering it, 2 cameras rendering the shadows. I mean, the overhead is way, way, way more than just rendering on a flat screen. So hopefully everyone understands that's part of the problem with the hardware spec. If you look at like Sony Morpheus, they're locked on which is PlayStation VR, they've just renamed. That's going to be very compelling because everybody has the same platform. Kind of like when you're developing for Gear VR, you know what everyone's going to have, so you can alter your game to lock on at 90 frames a second, and just dial down the graphics until you get it to that point. Whereas when you're developing for a PC, who knows what they're going to be running on, so you have to make all these different things, like we've always been on a PC, making the game tailored to your hardware. So I think the PlayStation VR probably is going to catch on first as far as selling the most units, because the games will all be identical. It's on a known platform. As we get forward, maybe a year or two from now, when you can buy a card from NVIDIA for $300-400, which is the target card price range right now for that most people want to spend for a card, to do something cool like VR, I think we're going to see a lot more. That'll give the developers a lot more time to be using the final hardware, to be using the final SDKs, like the Oculus SDK. They went from 0.6 to 0.7 recently. All the prior games stopped working. So until the SDKs get to be, a shipping version where all that stuff doesn't happen as well, it's going to delay adoption. So there are a few little bottlenecks and a few little hiccups we have to get out of the way before it becomes really mainstream, especially for the PC side of things. But for mobile and for PlayStation, I think we're going to see early adoption happen really quick. It'll be enthusiasts and people who are just a little bit excited at the beginning, and then probably a year or two from now, it'll get far more mainstream. And I think when we get into the social aspect of this, where people are looking at their Facebook videos, it's got to be something it's never going to be this small, because that's just not going to cover your peripheral vision and everything, but something that's easy to just slip on your face, get the experience, and take it off. I just don't see people going like this on their Facebook feed, or like roaming around and mixing a bunch of text. No one likes to read text in VR, so there's a huge challenge there. And I think until on the Facebook side they make it so it's nice and easy to pop on and off, they'll tie it more into the Facebook side, whereas I think maybe in the beginning they're just going to go more for games. And again, these are all my opinions, and only a few of those are things that I actually hear rumbling in Unity. But some of those are, it's a bit of a mixed bag there.
So Matt, you talked a little bit about the enterprise and VR. Tell me, guys, in games we talked a little bit about here, what else is the low-hanging fruit here? So is it sports? Like right away, is that joint sports thing you think is going to? Do you guys agree on that Tom's onto something here?
I would think so. I think from a standpoint of, did anyone watch the Democratic debate in the Gear VR 4 weeks ago? What'd you think? Don't answer that.
So this means it was awesome? Okay.
It made it so much more special.
I think back to the bigger conversation about video, because I think that's really going to be the compelling thing over the next year or so that people are going to want or demand in terms of experience real time. And we've got a lot of bandwidth things to figure out, because not being able to see the faces of the candidates and not having a practical way to have a rig in their face to be able to get that detail is a big challenge. And I hope guys like you can kind of figure out how we're going to get there, because that'll be very compelling when that happens.
I think I was going to say as well, being in the sports market, we always try and think of the customer, and ultimately you're competing against the ease of turning the TV on and pulling out your phone. And if the alternative, if you're going to have a social experience, you've got to convince 3, 4, 5 of your friends to go through a 10-step process to watch a game. That's too complicated, so it's got to become easier.
You've got to have a guy delivering beer.
Exactly, yeah.
Actually, probably more likely to be a woman the way they do it, right, Matt? It's more likely to be the Jim Beam girls or something delivering the beer. But
I like that too.
But but as so really to convince people, the experience could be better. But if actually getting to that experience is too painful, we're going to constantly hit that block. So, the market has to think of the consumer and make it accessible.
And the consumer goes for convenience. And the analogy I always think of is, if you look at the phone, people have gone from a high fidelity, I can hear your voice, I can relay a tremendous amount of information, to people don't use their phone as a phone anymore, they text.
Right.
Because it does such a better job. Even though the fidelity of the conversation and everything is worse, it's super convenient. So you don't want the phone call anymore.
And much to that point, instead of trying to refactor the timeline to be some kind of UI within virtual reality, which I think is a little ridiculous, use what the platform is good for. It becomes a great connector and scheduler for VR experiences. When are we going to convene when we have this time together to be able to put on our Oculuses at home?
So you're turning the social thing kind of upside down. You go to Facebook to say, hey, let's get together and have a virtual high school.
I just think it becomes something new. I don't think we need to jam it just because we can jam the current construct into VR. Doesn't mean we should.
You know, on the sports side, I saw something really cool. There's actually 2 NFL teams that are currently using this today. They use Unity and Samsung Gear VR, where they have the team's playbook all in VR. And you don't actually play the game, but you can pick any position and see how the opponent are going to react with certain defenses and how your team's going to react in certain offenses. So, say as a quarterback, you get the drop back, you get to see what routes your guys are running.
These are private apps, though.
These are private apps.
This is just for the guys on the team. Okay,
yes. But I've seen photos of 15, 18 guys on an airplane flying home.
Waving their arms, right?
Not really. You don't.
They got dork on their foreheads.
There wasn't a recent fake punt that. Was that from this?
That was a direct result of one guy.
One guy.
I don't know if you saw the Colts game, but
didn't work out. I wanted to save just a couple of minutes for some audience questions before we adjourn this fantastic panel. Do we have anybody out there curious to chime in with a question? Anybody at all? Oh, you're all shy. We do have one brave soul. Stand up. Tell us who you are. I'll repeat the question.
Well, that's why they're not brave. You got to make them stand up, turn the lights
on. So you're talking about social interaction. What percentage do you think is going to be based on voice and avatar kind of telepresence versus text inputs? And if it's text inputs, what are the input devices?
So percentage of live versus sort of pre-made setup stuff. Right?
Text and VR stinks.
Text and VR.
Yeah.
Okay.
No one wants to read in VR. If you don't want to read you don't want to read in the real world like this, and so you don't want to read text. I find.
We've done we've built VR versions of our products. They're not released because basically if we were to release them, we have millions of customers and both of them with VR could use the stuff that we release. So we haven't. But this test that we've done, we had to basically take typing out of it. One, because it's just hard to find the keyboard. Not everyone can type. So some people hunt and peck. But again, reading text is horrible. So we actually switched to using voice to actually make the experience work. The question about whether which percent of this will be sort of real life, I don't know. I mean, that's why I keep saying. That the concepts of what is going to be social and what we can do, I think as we know today, we have not actually discovered what's going to make this meaningful. People look towards virtual worlds and saying that's what social is like on VR, and I'm like, that's not it. That's not a meaningful experience.
When you're doing a lot of VR apps, or at least my setup is I have headphones on primarily, which means I'm not getting a lot of ambient noise, which makes doing speech recognition work really well. So games like Elite Dangerous, I can just basically talk, and the ship does what I tell it to do. Landing gear deploy, and landing gear is deployed. So that kind of stuff works. That's obviously a single player. Well, it's not. Well, whatever. You're not actually talking to other people. You're just talking to the computer to tell it to do things to your ship. But I can still see a similar thing where it's true voice as opposed to people trying to text. As soon as you break immersion, pick your headset up and start to type, it really does that break immersion thing, which stinks.
I also think it matters as to the context. So if you're hanging out with your friends, you definitely want people to know your voice.
Yeah.
So IMVU is a lot about meeting new people. It's anonymous, and a lot of times people want that layer of protection. So when they're out meeting people, they don't want to relay too much information. So the avatar is really helpful for saying, this is how I want you to see me, and people can choose to relay as much as they want. And so when we've had voice in our regular product, we found some people didn't want to use it because they didn't want people to sort of think they have a funny voice or anything else until they were more comfortable with them.
Okay, one last question. Stand up. Stand up. Tell us who you are.
Samir Gupta, Gulfstream. A lot of these technologies and games proliferate through sharing key moments. And so, for example, Farmville or whatever it is. How do you see VR and AR creating those shareable moments? In what form, and how do they move to current social networks?
How do you share the shareable moments out of VR and AR? What's the function going to be? I would think it'd be no different than what you've got in PlayStation now. You just click, or Destiny, you click a button and it says, here's a screenshot, and you can fill it up, or you're on Twitch and they can follow. But what do you guys think? How are these moments going to get captured and shared? particularly on Facebook.
I don't think we know. I mean, right now you're out with your friends and you all take a big, a selfie picture of everyone you're with and you post it on Facebook. And a year, 2, 3 years later, Facebook comes up and says, "Here's an old moment. Would you like to reshare it?" What is it? I'm interacting with someone in a 3D world, and what am I sharing? Is there a standard codec that I record that experience in some way, shape, or form? Maybe.
Which has inherent problems in itself. If you think about, even if you record the environment and you play it back for someone, false velocity and things like that is going to create that vomit effect.
Yeah,
so,
they're not gonna know what it is. They're not gonna be into it like you were. It's something that's in the moment. We're gonna have this experience, and there's no way to capture it right now.
And vomiting in social, unless it's a college thing. I mean,
unless it's the
that is a long tradition. Is
never
what I was going to say. I mean, it goes way
idea.
back. Not just college. I've done a lot of field research in this area. Anyway, so thank you very much, panel. I think we're going to wrap it up right now and give everybody a minute to come up and exchange cards and harass these guys and all that. Thank you, guys.